What is up, you beautiful guys and gals? It is Thomas on one here, and today I'm actually here to tell you guys that I went and saw Transformers the last night. It was really good. It left a bunch of questions that were unanswered in Transformers 1, 2, 3, and 4. They answered most of them in Transformers the last night. The main reason that the main one of the who on Earth are the Knights and what on Earth is going on with Earth, why do they keep coming back to Earth, and so we're gonna sit here, and this is a spoiler review, so I'm gonna give you like giving you to like the 1 minute mark that you guys can like skip ahead or get out of this, because this is gonna contain spoilers of the movie. So without further ado, let's go. To start our review off, we start out the movie with the Knights of the Round Table, and we see Merlin, otherwise known as Stanley Tucci. He does come back. Well, maybe not his character, but he does come back, and we see him going to the Knights that had crash landed there a long time ago. We see him going and making a deal with them to help face the war or some sort of battle going on with the Knights and a bunch of other things going on. And we see Merlin making a deal with them, and they give him Quintessa's staff. And Quintessa is basically a goddess of Cybertron, and she wants to harness Earth's power to rebuild Cybertron. And so basically that's the end of that, and then we cut away to the kids coming off of the bus, and of course the kids, I don't know, they didn't really say their names. They just said they basically just said, do you want to go see some dead robots? And which leads to the next scene, where all we see is Isabella and Squeaks, and Squeaks and Isabella, they take out 2 TRF sentries, which leads to the whole canopy scene, which was released a little while ago. I think it was at the Nickelodeon Kids' Choice Awards, something like that. And after that scene, then it goes to Bumblebee destroying a TRF, and then it comes to the next scene, which leads to the military arriving, trying to see what the heck's going on. And before Cade, they destroyed a TRF sentry, and Cade ends up looking at a crashed Cybertronian ship, and which has Steelbane inside of it, and Steelbane is carrying a Knights of Iacon talisman, and the talisman will protect you from anything. And he gives it to Cade, and Cade, of course, is like, I can't take this. You should keep it. You might live to see another day if you can, if you can do that. And so, of course, Steelbane dies, and the talisman ends up sprouting out 4 legs, and gets into Cade's car, and they drive off. They drive off to the junkyard, where we see Gerard Carmichael's character, where we see his character, and Wheelie. Wheelie does come back in the 5th movie. It was really interesting. They were looking at cars and stuff, and so then that cuts away to Drift hanging upside down, or balancing on a sword, trying to keep his chi centered. Sorry, my shirt's not wanting to stay down a bit, but we see that happen, and then it cuts from Drift doing that to Grimlock eating what looks to be a police car, and that cuts to a piece that cuts away to Cade driving right by the Indian Valley Reservation Police, I suppose. Maybe not Indian Valley, but it's just some police officer who just happens to be an Indian chief. And he says, I want my police cruiser back, you need to give it back to me. And so basically he gets his cruiser back, but then that cuts away to the military trying to make a negotiation with Megatron, which is really, really weird how they managed to put that into the movie, which they basically make a parlay, or not a parlay, but they basically make a small peace treaty with Megatron, and all they want is to get that talisman, because they know that the talisman will lead them to the ancient Quintessa staff, which will basically suck Earth dry, and it will rebuild Cybertron in a way. So the military makes a deal with Megatron, and this clip was released, I think. This clip was released a while ago, just not too long ago, where it shows 5 lawyers sitting at a table with Colonel Lennox, and Megatron, they said, he says, what do you want? And Megatron says, I want my crew back. And they said, okay, well, we can definitely he says, well, we can definitely see what we can do. And this leads to which leads to a cutaway of some Decepticons looking or being released, I guess, in a way. And the first one that they look at is Nitro, and Nitro is basically just this punk rocker Decepticon who turns into a motorcycle. And then then he says, I want Nitro Zeus, and Nitro Zeus is basically just a slightly better reincarnation of Shockwave, and he turns into a jet. And we don't see that in the movie. It's really confusing, because people are like, well, you really don't see Nitro Zeus turn into a jet at all. Then he says, he says, I want my Dread back. And Dread, it cuts away to Dread being released. Then he says, I want Berserker. And the lawyer guy said, no, we cannot release him because of we don't know what could happen. And then he says, okay, well, I want Onslaught back, which leads to Onslaught basically saying, you guys need a bigger door for my cell. So real fast, I gotta click out of something, but so he basically saying, he says, you guys need a bigger door. And then that cuts away to the junkyard, where, unbeknown to Bumblebee, one of the TRF Sentry guys had tagged him with he basically tagged him with a tracking beacon, and that's pretty much the end of the junkyard. And then we lead to the town, where Cade blows up most of the Decepticons, and the Autobots kill, the remainder, except for Megatron, who somehow manages to escape, along with Nitro and along with Barricade as well. Oh, Barricade does come back, which he is actually voiced by the guy who voiced Ironhide in Transformers 1, 2, and 3. So that was cool. So, which leads to Vivian Wembley, who we only figure this out way later in the movie, that she is a descendant from Merlin the Great, and so it can only be, and the staff can only be how shall we say, it can only be touched, I suppose, and used by a direct descendant of Merlin, because the knights, bestowed upon, they said, keep this safe, it'll be, only you can activate it, and only your kin can activate it. So that was pretty much how that segment ends. And then we learn that Hot Rod is basically he's a Citron. He's a Citron, and he has a French accent. And so Bumblebee, or no, not Bumblebee, what's his name? Sir Anthony Hopkins' character, he's basically a Witwicken, which the Witwickens are basically the key holders of the Transformers secrecy, which are descendants from Merlin. But you know, they have to be direct descendants from Merlin. And Vivian is the only one who is direct descendant from Merlin, and thus Sam Witwicky makes his cameo appearance, and so on and so forth. And Hot Rod is stuck with a French accent, you know. And so it was interesting. He says, "Little lady, don't move," you know. He says his excuse for having the French accent is he was stuck with it during World War II. He started speaking like the French because of he had to live with the French a lot, and so that was his excuse, was that he was stuck with the accent, and he said, "I can't get rid of this accent. It's annoying. I don't like it," and so on and so forth. But Sir Anthony Hopkins says, he's like, you know, "Oh, don't worry about it. He likes that accent, so that he just stuck with it." And so Hot Rod continues to deny it, but then most of the clips after that are on YouTube, or a little more, or they're on YouTube or Transformers websites or something like that. And then then all of that cuts to Optimus Prime landing on Cybertron, meeting Quintessa, turning him into Nemesis Prime. I was correct about this. Somebody told me, nobody YouTube knows, but basically somebody had told me that Unicron and Optimus Prime will not be turned into Nemesis Prime. And basically Quintessa, she smacks him, and half of his face turns red, and I suppose that's the mark of Quintessa. And it's really nice, it's really cool. And so of course Megatron has already been corrupted by Quintessa, because in the movie, on this side of Megatron's face, we see that giant red mark, which is really cool. So it was a good movie. I'm not gonna say any more in this part because I don't want to spoil the ending, because the ending was pretty good. There is one thing that I will say, that Agent Simmons comes back, and only he knows this secret, and so he knows that Earth is classified as Unicron, because during the time of Quintessa trying to bring Cybertron to Earth, like Sentinel Prime had tried to do, he had basically Unicron, basically there was 9 horns that were sticking out from random areas around the world, and they realized, oh, it's a Unicron. And so I think they're setting it up for another movie. I don't think Michael Bay is going to direct it. I'd like to see who does direct it, because Michael Bay has stated, and the trailers have confirmed our suspicions, that he will not be directing Transformers 6, which is supposed to bring Unicron to life. And you know, I think that's what's going to happen, is that Unicron's going to come back to life. Quintessa is not dead. Let's put it this way. Quintessa is not dead. They ended her with the movie, they ended her with her basically taking on a human form, like we saw in Transformers 2 with that really weird, creepy girl. And so she is basically like that. And so she's, you know, she comes up to this hiker, and he's trying to touch, you know, one of the mysterious horns that's coming out of the world, or out of Earth, correction. And she says, "Don't touch him, he doesn't like that." And he says, "Who doesn't like that?" And she says, "Unicron." And so he says, "Well, who's Unicron?" She's like, "It's your planet." She's like, "He doesn't like that, but I know how to kill him." So basically, she wanted to kill Unicron and destroy Earth during the process. So that's pretty much the whole plan. That was her plan, and I'm really excited for the next movie, if there will be one. I don't think Michael Bay will direct this one. I would like to see Shia LaBeouf return to Transformers because it would really complete the storyline. Oh, before I forget, Sir Anthony Hopkins' character does not make it. Megatron ends up killing him. So it's pretty much what everybody else has been suspicious about, is that really fast. Cogman is a headmaster, but he cannot transform into a head because the body that he used to fuse with had been destroyed long time ago, like during the 60s and 70s. But he is a headmaster, and they do say that in the movie, and that's pretty much it. So I do recommend going to go see this. It's really good. It's a long movie, but it's really good. It's not as long as Age of Extinction. Age of Extinction was 2 hours and 45 minutes. This movie is about 2 hours and 25 minutes, minus the 5 minutes for the end credits. So I do recommend going to go see that. Going to go see this movie. My toy list has changed a bit. I do not want to get Squeaks. I want to get Hot Rod and Megatron. Those are the last two that I want to get. So before I forget, this is Thomas Final One saying goodbye for now, and don't forget to go see Transformers Last Night. It is a great movie, and goodbye.